Hello friends, welcome back to the next session on Service Operations Management. Now let's begin with our learning. In this particular session, we'll be understanding and dealing with the concepts of problems and issues with product and process improvements. The learning objectives. At the end of this particular session, the learners will be able to understand what do we mean by product and process improvements. What are the various activities that have been undertaken in terms of product and process improvements, and what are the various problems and issues that have been associated with the concept of product and process improvements. Simultaneously, we'll also understand why and how product and process improvements activities are being undertaken in a business organization and how to overcome those problems with respect to the product and process improvements. Now let's begin with our learning. Understanding the concept of product and process improvements. Product improvement is the process of making the significant improvements to a product that results in the acquisition of the customers or the enhancement of existing customer advantage. So the concept of product improvements is of a consideration where the organization is trying to invent or trying to bring in new product to the organization or to the market. The customer is ultimately using the product, and when a customer gets satisfied with the usage of one product, several other products additionally are being provided to the consumers, in which the customers, we try to see that he gets associated with our organization. There is always a repeated purchase that is being undertaken with respect to the product, and hence which the activity that results in the acquisition of new customers or the enhancement of the existing customers is called as the product improvement. So in this case, we are trying to identify that how do we create the new customers to our product, or how the existing customers of our product are being retained in the business organization. Adding new features to the product or improving the current ones are the two most popular approaches. Now, in this case, what the organization or the company or the businesses they are trying to do is the existing product which is available into the market, there's several revisions or modifications in that particular products are being undertaken, or else the new product is brought into the market and then it is been offered or that has been delivered to the customers. During the product development process, the purpose of this particular activity is to assist how the business can proactively contribute or participate in providing a better, efficient and qualitative product to the consumers, where in case they have to see that the value of the business, the value of the customers is also being created, and simultaneously the operational cost of the organization is also being reduced or it is also being minimized. Now let us understand what is the process improvements example. So the process improvement examples are the various steps that are undertaken. Number one, that is improving the product quality. So the organization can improve its product quality, and on that particular basis, the process improvement activity can be undertaken, or the product improvement activity can be implemented in the organization. Number two, the second example that can be used is upgrading the service quality. So whatever product that we are offering or that we are delivering to the customers, we are trying to increase the service quality. That is, maybe it during the sale or maybe the service which is been required after the sales. And hence, for those consideration, improving the service quality is essentially important. In terms of the various service operations management, we have seen what do we mean by a service call model, wherein it focuses on 5 factors on which the quality or essence of service can be assessed and it can be judged. And hence, upgradation of service quality is essentially important. Improving the delivery times. A customer who wants to purchase a certain product always expects that within the specified time period or before the expected time of delivery, the product should reach to them. And hence, for this consideration, the delivery times should ultimately be observed, and the organization should take care that the product should be delivered within the specified time period. And hence, the process improvement activity can be undertaken only when we have a proper control on the manufacturing activity, the assembly line, and the delivery time is also being matched accordingly. The next perspective or the example is reducing the billing cycles. The billing cycles is movement of inventory from one level to another level or one assembly line to another assembly. For this consideration, we need to observe and we need to see that how do we control the billing cycle and the control on the movement of factors of production, that is land, labor, capital, enterprise and resources, or the delivery of service quality is effective, efficient, speedy and quickly. And hence reduction of billing cycle, that is movement of goods from one services to another services, one platform or one department to another department is effective. The concept of movement of billing cycle or reduction of billing cycle is called as the transfer pricing, wherein the goods are being moving from one department to another department, and hence a charge or a bill is moved from one department to another department, making the production more efficient. So in order to see that our production activity is more efficient, one has to see that the factors of production that have been employed or that have been used are effectively used in a business concern, and they are the regulatory activities in a part of a business organization. And hence, the process improvement activity of movement of goods and services can be undertaken very effectively only when we have the effective production capacity and the activities are being undertaken in a very well coordinated way. Now let us understand what are the various steps of the process improvement. So here in this case, we have taken an example of a sauce manufacturing company, wherein what are the various process or activities that needs to be undertaken to manufacture or produce a certain amount of sauce. So the steps or the process improvement activities that involved are the supplier, the input, the processes, the output, and ultimately the customer. So as per the brand that is available into the market, that is Frevo, a sauce manufacturing company, what are the various steps that we need to identify on what basis the process improvement activity can be initiated. Now let's understand the first step, that is the supplier. So in case of the supplier, we need to identify what will be the amount of grocery that will be required, where is the grocery store, whether the grocery will be sourced out from the local farm shop or from where the grocery will be purchased. And lastly, from where the jar will be taken, that is the container in which the sauce needs to be packed and it needs to be delivered to the customer. And hence, we need to identify the supplier from all those perspectives, that is the grocery, the local farm shop, or the jar maker. So these are the various process improvement activities with respect to the suppliers. Now, in case of an input, we need to identify what are the various raw material or the inputs that will be required in an organization to manufacture a sauce. So those improvement activities are the oil, the garlic, the onions, the tomatoes, the water, sugar, salt, oregano, heat, saucepan, chef, and 2 hours of a time duration. So these are the various inputs based on which a sauce can be manufactured and it can be delivered to the customers. And hence, the process improvement activity with respect to the inputs are a variable components of product, which is with respect to the raw materials. Now let us understand the third process, that is the processes. So in terms of the processes, the various activities that can be undertaken in sauce manufacturing is dicing the garlic and onions, add oil to the saucepan, cooking the garlic and onions for 2 minutes, add tomatoes and then water, sauce, sugar, salt, simmer for 1 hour. Then we have to add oregano and seal in the sterilized jar. So these are the various process or activities, one after another, that has been undertaken in order to manufacture, in order to process the raw sauce. So in this way, what happened? The sauce is being processed and the manufacturing activity is being undertaken. So that's the concept of process improvement. One after another, each and every single step or step-by-step activity is being undertaken, and then the sauce is being manufactured. The next output activity is the tomato pasta sauce that has been prepared. So we have the finished tomato which is in existence. It has been processed. Certain manufacturing or process activities are undertaken over it, and accordingly, along with the pasta and the sauce has been prepared. That was the concept of output. Now, lastly, we have the customer. So in case of the customer, we have the various online buyers for the Frevo, and accordingly, the product is been ready to be delivered to the customers. And with every specific time duration, the activity is been planned, it has been scheduled, and hence those activities are being undertaken in the business organization. And hence such series or flows of activity needs to be undertaken. Now let us understand what do we mean by the concept of swim lane. So swim lane is a particular activity wherein each and every process or each and every activity is been moving from one level to another level, and no activity can be either skipped in the organization. So what does these swim lanes include? Number one, that is the procurement department. The procurement is the manufacturing, the inventory, the stores, the warehousing, and such departments are being included in the concept of swim lanes. Procurement department has to always see that what are the various amount of goods and services, the raw material the processing activities, the finished goods that will be required, and how those particular goods, services, commodities will be readily made available in the business organization. So that is the concept of procurement department or the role. The second participant is the procurement manager. So in terms of the procurement manager, the manager has to always see that what are the various roles, responsibilities that he has to follow, and within a specific time duration or a certain activity, how does he undertake those activities as and when the time that is been required. The external supplier. So in case of an external supplier, we need to identify from which different sources the products or the raw material needs to be sourced, and how those particular material or the product will be identified and it will be fulfilled or it will be delivered to the customers in this specific time period. And hence, identification of the external suppliers, getting a proper quotation, a proper order, and placing the proper order in the timely delivery is essentially important. The finance department. Finance department plays a very important, crucial role in identifying what will be the amount of funds that will be required and how the money that is going to required will be made applicable in or will be made available in this specific time period. And hence, finance department also has to undertake the activity of swimlane. Now let us understand how do we consider the breakdowns of 6 M's that are being associated with this issue, that is the product and process improvement. Number one, that is the mother nature. So here one needs to understand very clearly as to how do we consider the various environmental factors or the natural factors that needs a certain amount of improvements. The natural or the environmental factors are available on the basis of no harm that is to be caused to the mother nature. The resources that are required for manufacturing, production, or operational activities are always limited in nature, but the unlimited wants of the human beings are getting continuously associated for consumption of those resources. And hence, proper protection of mother nature or the resources of the environment or the nature or the climate needs to be controlled in a very effective way. The second perspective is the manpower, that is staffing as a major issue. So here in this case, when we organize or when we design the particular team, the team should be organized in such a way that the team should be a combination of all the factors that are being associated. That is a marketing expert, a finance expert, a product expert, a technical expert, a software expert, a HR, that is a human resource expert, and so on. And hence, manpower planning is essentially important, based on which we can come to a conclusion as to how effective and productive activities can be taken, and a balance between all the organizational activities can be undertaken in a business organization. The next perspective is, or the M that has been associated, is the machine. So the use of machine or the technologies in the business environment for the effective and better product and process improvements is essentially important. For this consideration, one needs to understand and consider how do we use or how do we equip the various resources and materials that are required. Various uses of technologies, machinery, materials needs to be made in an effective consideration, and all those machinery should be of an upgraded and technologically advanced level. And hence, effective use of machinery is essentially important. The measures, that is where in case we need to understand what are the various key performance indicators. So analysis of tracking the mechanism, that is which activity is important, which activity is primary, which activity is secondary, is also essentially important. And on those particular basis, we need to understand and identify how those activities can be conducted in a better way or effectively in a business organization. And hence, for those consideration of these activities, it is essentially important to see that how do we consider those activities, and we have a proper control or better understanding of controlling those activities in the short run as well as in the long run. The next perspective or the consideration is the methods. So in case of the methods, one need to be very understand and clear about what are the various processes and activities that can be undertaken in a business organization and how those methods can be controlled in a very effective way. So proper, effective and process of design and process improvements is essentially important in order to see that those methods that we are going to implement or the activities that are going to be conducted are very systematic and in an organization are very coordinated in very better consideration. And lastly, the concept of materials. So in case of a business organization, when that materials are being moving from one location to another location, one machines to another machine, there should be a consideration at there is no bottlenecks that is being created. Bottleneck is a hurdle or a certain burden to an organization due to which the production or manufacturing activity can be at a standstill position, and it can consider a material to blockage of flowing from one location to another location. Now let us understand what are the various common process improvements, that the mistakes that can become into existence, and how to avoid those mistakes. Number one, details before the context. So before starting any activity or a certain operational cost, we need to have a proper understanding about how do we solve those particular activities, and a proper information about those activities is needed to be ready to made available. Artifacts over the processes. Always, whenever any process or activity that is needed to be undertaken, we must have an artificers over those particular processes. That is, how the activity can be undertaken, in what way the activity can be conducted in a very better way, and what type of knowledge, skill, and ability can be applied to those activities. No case for a certain action. So if at any stage it has been observed that a certain action is not required any case, or a certain action does not require any improvements, so based on those particular actions or improvements in the particular cases, a certain preferences and priorities must be given, and accordingly the process improvements must be employed. Not involving the enough people. So involvement of sufficient number of people or the laborers or the employees is essentially required, and hence identification of number of laborers, the number of people who are required to deploy in a particular manufacturing activity is essentially important. And hence, for improving the process activity, it is essentially to identify and see that how do we identify the human resource that is required, and proper availability of human resource is essentially important. Not understanding the stakeholders. So if we do not understand the stakeholders properly, we cannot estimate or we cannot predict that what are their expectations, what do they expect from the business organization, and how their expectations can be fulfilled in the short run as well as in the long run. And hence, understanding the stakeholders is essentially important. Failure to define the terminology. So here in this case, defining and understanding the terminology is essentially important. And from those considerations, if we fail to identify what type terminology we are focusing on, what is the aim, target, and motive or objectives of the business organization, all those things needs to be considered in a very effective way, and accordingly, planning of such activities is essentially important. Solving the problems too quickly. So the problems that have been associated with the business organizations should not be solved very quickly, but a proper analysis of those problems is needed to be undertaken. And then a proper feasible solution needs to be identified, and then it needs to be implemented. Too much uses of technology. That is, excessive use of technology at times may harm the product, and accordingly, it may lead an organization to create an activity in either and either way. And hence, one must try to see that excessive use of technology should be avoided, and for those particular consideration, no excessive use of technology should be adopted. Not enough details. So not having the proper information about the process or the product or a certain activity that needs to be implemented is harmful to a business organization. And hence, having not enough detail about a certain product or a certain activity is essentially required, and it may cause a harm to the organization. And hence, such activities or mistakes needs to be avoided. And lastly, not taking the appropriate action. So when any action that is being needed, it should be taken very immediately and quickly, and such action should be avoided as and when the need arises. So taking initiative and proper action is essentially important, and on those particular basis, the action needs to be implemented very quickly and effectively. Now let us understand what are the concepts of process owners. So in case of process owners, we have an example of business process improvements. So turning the business challenges into benefits. So on the left hand side, we have the business challenges, and on the right hand side, you have the business benefits. So these are the various business challenges that in an organization, which a company or an organization focuses or it occurs or they observes. These particular challenges may be customer complaints and poor quality, poor operating performance and revenues, high processing cost, low productivity and inefficient processes, and employee dissatisfaction and low morale. So when these particular business challenges are being observed, the organization can implement the business process improvement cycle. And when the business process improvement cycle is being implemented with the various steps, and the steps that needs to be initiated are defining the customer value, eliminating the waste in the organization, upskilling and empowering the people, eliminating the waste and rework and the scrap, that is focusing on the scrap or reduction of waste in the organization, enhancing the service quality, delivering the project on time, alignment of strategic objectives and goals, and lastly, delivering the strategic goals. So if all these business process improvement activities are being implemented in the business organization, the resultant or the output will be the business benefits that the organization gets. And the business benefits that can be achieved is With the help of customer complaints and poor quality, we have the improved customer performance and the receipt of it. Poor operating performance and revenue is the resultant of improved financial performance. High processing cost is the resultant of high value-added processes and the less waste in the organization. The low productivity and inefficient processes is the resultant of reduced lead time and faster processing. And lastly, the challenge as to employee dissatisfaction and low morale is the resultant of greater employee engagement. And hence, the business process improvement cycle or the steps that have been initiated, that is to BPI, are turning the business challenges into benefits. And hence, the various business challenges that are available on the left-hand side gets converted to the business benefits on the right-hand side. Now let us understand how do we optimize the workflow. So the optimization of workflow can be improved by conducting the various activities or the various steps that can be implemented in the business organization. Those particular activities or the steps can be the increase in the speed, creating a better accuracy, control on the cost, bringing in the transparency in all the activities, end products that is focused on the end product, that is the finished goods, building or developing a healthy relationship between the organization, that is within the internal and the external environment, improving or creating the better productivity or increasing the number of outputs, increasing the staff satisfaction level, supplier relationship, and lastly, the customer satisfaction. So by optimizing the workflow activities, by improving all these particular steps and implementing these particular considerations in the organization, the workflow activities, that is the process improvement and the product improvement, can be undertaken in a better way in the business organization. And hence, here we have understood and we have identified that one of the most typical challenge with continuous improvement is the team implementation. And hence, as a part of the business process improvement or the management, which completely focuses on systems implementation, neglecting to keep the rest of the organizations informed. And hence, we must always try to see that how do we focus on the continuous improvement as a part of a process activity, and it is implemented on a continuous basis in a business organization. Due to the lack of time and expertise in a business organization, the various process improvement and initiatives activities that can be undertaken may be either of a greater extent or maybe of a lower extent, but it should always be continued in an organizational flow or in an organizational activity. So in order to identify that higher quality and outcomes can be implemented, the waste elimination activities should be implemented in the business organization, and hence those activities should be conducted in a better way. Now let's summarize what we have learned in this particular session. In this particular session, we have understood what do we mean by the product and what do we mean by the process improvements. What are the various problems and issues that have been associated with the concept of product and process improvements? And lastly, how do we implement the concept of product and process improvements in the general business organization? I hope you must have enjoyed the learning in this particular session. We will continue with our learning. Thank you for your patience listening. Thank you.